Every mythology has a trickster, and every mythology says the same thing about them. They're dangerous, chaotic, not to be trusted. And yet they're the ones who bring fire, who break unjust laws, who save humanity when the good gods won't. Loki in Norse myth. Anansi weaving stories across West Africa. Coyote howling through Indigenous American traditions. Elegba standing at the crossroads in Yoruba practice. Hermes slipping between worlds in ancient Greece. Completely different cultures. Completely different eras. Same exact archetype. And you have to ask yourself, why? These figures are always liminal. They shape-shift. They cross boundaries that other gods respect. They exist between worlds, between life and death, order and chaos, human and divine. They break categories that the powerful gods are stuck inside. Loki fathers monsters and births an 8-legged horse. Anansi becomes a spider and negotiates with the sky god. Coyote transforms into anything he needs to be. Elegba opens and closes the door between realms. Hermes walks freely through the underworld when even Zeus can't. And here's what's strange, they're never the most powerful gods. Not even close. But they're always the ones the myths can't function without. Without Loki, the gods don't get their greatest treasures. Without Anansi, humanity doesn't get stories. Without Coyote, there's no fire. Without Elegba, there's no communication with the divine. Without Hermes, the dead don't reach the afterlife. The trickster isn't optional. The trickster is structural. Here's what tricksters actually do. They solve the problems the proper gods won't touch. Prometheus doesn't ask Zeus for permission to give humans fire. He steals it. Because Zeus would never say yes, and humans would freeze in the dark without it. The official channels failed, so Prometheus went around them. Anansi sees the sky god Niame hoarding every story in existence, keeping all knowledge locked away where no one can reach it, and he doesn't petition for reform. He tricks Niame into releasing them. Because knowledge hoarded is knowledge dead, and someone had to crack that vault open. Even Loki, who everyone loves to hate, is constantly cleaning up messes the other gods can't handle. He's the one who gets Thor's hammer back from the giants. He helps build Asgard's walls. He solves half the problems his own chaos creates. He's not the disease, he's the immune system, attacking threats the body doesn't even recognize yet. Tricksters operate outside divine lore because divine lore is usually designed to keep power exactly where it already is. They're not villains. They're the pressure release valve on a system that would otherwise explode. They're what happens when the rules become more important than the people the rules were supposed to protect. And that's not rebellion for rebellion's sake. That's evolution. That's survival. Here's the thing nobody wants to admit. Order doesn't just need chaos. Order dies without it. In Norse mythology, Ragnarok, the end of everything, happens partly because the gods tried to bind chaos instead of working with it. They chain Loki beneath the earth, venom dripping onto his face for eternity, and that punishment? That's what sets the end in motion. The gods thought they could just lock away the disruptive force and keep their perfect system running forever. Instead, they guaranteed their own destruction. Because systems that refuse to bend will eventually break. And in the Yoruba tradition, Elegba isn't some minor player. He's literally the god of crossroads, of communication between realms. Without him, the other Orisha can't even be reached by humans. He's the necessary threshold. the opening, the disruption that makes connection possible. You can't have divine order without the one who breaks the seal. Same with Coyote in Indigenous stories across North America. His tricks aren't just entertainment, and they're definitely not about being random or cruel. They're lessons in adaptation, in survival when the rules don't account for reality. When the system says, this is how it works, and reality says, actually, no. The trickster is what every stable system tries to suppress, the truth that change is the only constant, and rigidity is death. They're not villains. They're the immune system, the thing that keeps the whole structure alive. So here's what actually gets them destroyed. Loki gets bound with his own son's entrails, venom dripping on his face for eternity, not because he was evil, but because he showed up to a feast and said the quiet part out loud. He named every god's hypocrisy, every buried shame, every lie they'd agreed not to mention. And they couldn't forgive that. Prometheus gets chained to a rock, his liver eaten daily by an eagle, technically for giving humans fire, sure. But really? For making humanity less dependent on the gods. For breaking their monopoly on power. The punishment is always excessive. Always cruel. Always designed to make an example. Because what the trickster threatens isn't order, it's control. They expose the difference between the two. Order is what serves everyone. Control is what serves the ones in charge. And the trickster refuses to pretend those are the same thing. They're dangerous because they won't accept the binary. You don't have to be good or evil, obedient or rebellious. You can be useful and disruptive at once. You can serve the world by breaking the rules that no longer serve it. That's the real crime. Not chaos. Not malice. It's showing everyone else that the supposed rules were always negotiable, and that the people enforcing them have the most to lose if you stop believing. So here's the thing. Tricksters didn't disappear when we stopped carving their names in stone. They just changed clothes. Every whistleblower who leaks documents the powerful want it buried. That's trickster energy. Every person who breaks an unjust law and dares the system to justify itself. Trickster. Every hacker who exposes corruption. Every artist who makes the uncomfortable truth impossible to ignore. They're performing the same function Loki and Anansi and Coyote performed thousands of years ago. They're the ones who see that the system is broken and refuse to pretend it isn't, even when everyone else is nodding along like everything's fine. And here's what people miss. Tricksters aren't nihilists. They're not burning things down for fun. Loki loves his children fiercely. Anansi protects his people. Coyote teaches survival, even when the lesson hurts. They care too much to let broken things stay broken. They care enough to risk being hated for pointing at the crack in the foundation everyone else is stepping over. Because when the rules start serving power instead of people, when the system protects itself more than the ones it's supposed to serve, the trickster is the one who reminds us something we desperately need to hear. The rules were made by someone. Which means they can be changed. And sometimes, they must be. Here's what the trickster actually does. They don't save you with strength. They don't call down lightning or part seas. They save you by teaching you how to think differently. How to adapt. How to see the third option when everyone else only sees two. They're the gods who remember what it's like to be mortal. To be powerless. To need a trick because you don't have a magic hammer or control over the sun. They know what it's like when the odds are stacked and the rules are rigged and all you have is your brain and your nerve. In every mythology, When the chips are down, the trickster is the one who sides with humans. Not because we're noble, not because we're pure, but because we're vulnerable. And someone has to. Someone has to be the god who says, the system's broken, here's how you work around it. The chaos they bring isn't destruction. It's the cracking open of new possibilities when every door is locked. It's the moment you realize the wall has a loose board, that the game has a glitch, that there's always another way if you're willing to look crooked. The next time everything falls apart, the next time the system fails you, the next time you have to break a rule to survive, you're not being bad. You're channeling something ancient, something necessary, something the gods themselves couldn't do without. Follow Blackfire Atelier. I'll see you in the shadows.